Let's talk herd. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Camille. So
Thank
good to
you
be with
so
you this
much.
morning.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you here. So you have had quite a life-changing experience with one special horse, and I'd love to hear about that.
It's hard to even know where to begin with that, but yeah, at the time that I bred Tempo, she's the only horse I've ever even thought about breeding and training. But at the time, I was very involved in riding and training, and that was one of those goals that I think a lot of us have when we're in the mindset of the traditional horse industry, right? And our relationship with horses and what it means to be a good horse person. And I wanted to have the experience of raising a foal from birth and training in the ways that I believed at the time were the healthiest and most humane and most. So that was where my journey with Tempo started long before she was even born, right? With my own ideas of what everything in my relationship with horses and relationship with myself started to unravel because once she was born, nothing really went according to the plans. She's a very sensitive horse, a very strong-willed horse in some ways at the same time that she's very sensitive. And I began with positive reinforcement training with her in the beginning that did go very well. And, to the extent that you do have choice within even positive reinforcement, and we could talk a lot about that as well. One of the big lessons in my journey with her is that positive reinforcement, even though, it's using positive rewards, can be highly manipulative as well. Quite manipulative, but often in ways that in those relationships. But so I consulted with several surgeons here in the U.S., and they all said they wouldn't do it because the only way to get to it was through the hoof wall. And there was a almost 99% chance that she would develop an infection inside the hoof and then would have to be put down. So we embarked in a completely unknown territory of attempting to use stall rest and injections and medications to help her body heal from this. But for a young filly who was very violent, she had none of that, although she could interact. It was an outdoor stall and she could interact with the other horses. So she was never isolated, but she didn't understand what was happening. And it was such a severe shift in her lifestyle that she knew it. And in our relationship, as she knew it, I was working full time at the time, and I had to go in the mornings before work and give her the injections or medications or check her hoof, get that done before I went to work. And then, I switched into caretaker mode completely, where I just felt like I was trying to help her heal physically and taking away almost all choice. At that, her response to that was aggression. Right. And even though she was only a year old, if you know large yearlings, they're very strong, right? So this became dangerous very, very quickly. And she came to assert her autonomy, right? And so she didn't want me in there with her because she was worried about what would happen. She was in pain all the time. I don't know how much she knew, what was pain caused by me, what was pain, she was just in a very challenging state. And they're very smart, they all are. She knew very quickly that I could let her out if I chose to, and that I was not choosing to let her out when I came through the door. Anyway, this was a very dark time for both of us. It took her 8 months in total to heal. I was just coping as best I could during that time, both grieving what I knew was lost about all my dreams with her. That had been, of course, very self-centered dreams, but that was all I knew at the time, right? And then being worried about, was I making the right decisions? And there's so many layers here I'd love us to maybe dive into a little bit.
Yeah, because I wanted to confirm that she didn't have any other horses at this stage to help her, because she was still a baby, really, wasn't she? Still developing. So she didn't have, she didn't have a herd.
Correct. Yeah. Her mother, I owned her mother too. And then another gelding. At the time, I just had 3 horses, and the gelding was obviously not her father, but he raised her. I think they had very much, he thought of her. He was there with her from the day she was born. So they were very much a family unit, and she still had them, but could only access them over the railings, the gate of the stall that we had built outside for her. She couldn't interact in the ways that a herd would, right? It was very unnatural interactions. So this was a key point of social learning for her that she missed. And in the place of that was this really dysfunctional way of interrelating, both with the other horses and with me, right?
Yeah. And it must have been so hard for you, because you were just doing what you felt was right for the situation. But you can't make yourself feel good about something that you don't feel good about. And they just know how you're feeling. So how do you bring positive energy or feedback into that for her? It's really hard. It must have been it must have made you feel like you needed to rethink everything, really.
Yes. Eagerly, right. When we trust them to be able to know their own experience and be in control of it, right? She's capable of, even at that young age, even being not fully developed emotionally, not fully socialized through the herd as a yearling, she still knew enough to be able to manage herself had I given her space and opportunity to do that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. There's so much power in that, isn't there? Yeah, when you trust that. I just want to ask you before we carry on. It's maybe a little controversial, but did you ever consider just going against the traditional medicine, that way of looking at things, the veterinary kind of perspective, and just consider just putting her out and say, okay, that the emotional damage was taking too much of a toll, and we're just going to have to see what happens. Did that ever cross your mind at all, or was it too, would it have been crossing too much of a line?
It's a great, great question. And it did cross my mind, and it's so valuable to talk openly about, even as not proud of it all, right? But to understand all the layers that to do right by our horses. And so I was raised very much a science-minded type, family. My husband, ex-husband now, but my husband at the time was very much science and training in veterinary medicine. We've all heard it. Don't bring that woo-woo stuff around here, right? I, in my heart, as a child, I was very in tune with, I don't call it woo woo, but in tune with my soul and the holistic ways of being in the world. But I had closed those off as coping in all areas of my life, even in my own health. So I thought about it, but then the voices of everyone around me, no, you need to do what the vets are saying. You need to be conservative. We can't risk it.
Yeah.
And there were not a lot of
support.
There were not a lot of vets. Well, not a lot of. Most of the vets I talked to said that just putting her out was probably going to not be good. There was one vet who said to me, I don't think it matters either way, whether she's, confined or not confined. I think her prognosis is going to be the same. I wish that I had the bravery to consider that. But yeah, at the time for me, there was so much fear and outside voices in my head that I couldn't listen to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is a real strong fear of that it's like we need to somehow preserve them. And I'm just trying to define it because it's very, I've affronted or experienced that quite a lot in my life, because I feel like I've always been going the other way. I've always been very suspicious, and I don't know if I no doubt attracted a lot of experiences where I saw the dark side of the interventionist kind of way of going about things. So I was always very much woo woo, just never confine them, and don't give them drugs, and don't do surgery. And there were some miraculous healings and things that happened that were stressful in one way because of that fear that we're talking about right now, that is so prevalent in society. So it's, even when you have decided that you feel like, for example, we never vaccinated our horses because when that first became a thing, to do that every year for dogs, I just saw that it was making them ill. So I felt, no, we're not going to do that. I just felt them toxic. And but then there was the fear. There's a great fear, especially about tetanus and those things. And it's a real, because you feel like if that fear is there, then that's going to affect things, and it's going to attract the very thing that you don't want to happen. But then you can't. How do you go against what you're feeling? You're kind of, you're knowing that you have. So it's very, and it does come down to, you're either going with the fear or you're going with your inner knowing. And I do think that inner knowings can be, and they're very individual. So I wouldn't say to anyone, I wouldn't judge anyone for doing something that they felt was right, because I think it's really finding what's right, isn't it? And are you doing this because you're scared? Because it's also easy to say, well, you shouldn't be scared, but it's something that as a society, we've really, it's almost developed out of that fear. Most of the things that we rely on have, so it's complicated. Yeah.
Well, it's very complicated, and the journey with Tempo that I've been on has been about relearning how to listen to my inner knowing. But there's this other layer to it with, I'm going to go back to this ownership of horses. And when I really sat with what was driving so much of that fear, the truth is, I felt responsible for her life because I had chosen to breed my mare. And almost, I didn't create her life. I don't have that power, but I had had a hand in even bringing her physical being into this world. I also had not asked Puck, whether she wanted to be bred, overstep our rights, frankly, our what is healthy. And so her life began with all these choices that had not been, I was making on her behalf, right? And so then I think there was all this guilt in addition to fear of like, well, I made the decision to help bring her here into this world. I'm fully responsible for her physical well-being. It was a bad cycle. Instead of what I know is healthy is to understand that every living being is an autonomous being. And with people, if we have a sick loved one, we can at least ask them, what approach do they want to take? And with a horse, although I do believe we can ask them in ways, and they have ways to communicate with us. But at this time in my life, I wasn't even in tune with that possibility. So it never even really occurred to me, other than I did ask her, because there were half of the vets that I consulted with said I should put her down, immediately upon diagnosis. I knew everything in my being from her told me that she was not on board with that choice. Like she was so full of life and wanting to be here, despite everything. That I didn't follow that advice because I could see that was not her path. Clearly, from her, I was getting that. But beyond that, I wasn't doing at that time in my life a very good job of trying to listen to what she needed. And in hindsight, I would say my guess is that she didn't heal because of the injections that we gave her or the medications. And my gut tells me that she would have healed fine and perhaps more quickly had I not confined her. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you could also say that the confinement was what initiated your an awakening. I'm not saying it's like the only thing, but it was very powerful. So maybe there aren't any mistakes, really.